we're talking about financial independence, retire early, and having that as a money goal because that's our ultimate goal. But every one of these concepts and steps also helps you get out of debt too. So this is the same, like take it away from one of you two, put it out in front, like Danielle is saying, use these same concepts of that budgeting, create it so that it aligns with your values and the lifestyle that you want to live, build these habits, build these beliefs about money.
Hi, this is Danielle and
Kyra,
and you're listening to Scrunchy-Fi, a show by mamas for mamas. Here we cover all the creative ways to make money, save money, and invest to reach financial freedom and live the life you want.
Welcome back. We're on for another exciting episode. So let's lay it down. Our show is different. We're two mamas, two women talking about money. You could go out there, search on the podcast about investing, about, money advice, and you're not going to see a lot of women out there talking about it. So it's really cool that, me and you are talking about it. We are sharing with other mamas, talking to our husbands about money. You would think it's the other way around, right? Where I know I'm going to stereotype and say there's a lot of husbands out there that probably manage the finances 100%, and a lot of women, their spouses, they don't really get involved. We're turning the tables here. We manage our finances, and we had to get our spouse involved. So I remember the first time I talked to my husband, one about money. How much do you make? How much do I make? Let's talk about jobs. What do we think about our future? Kind of when we were starting to get a little more serious. And then talking about having a money goal. We wanted to travel for a year after we got married. So that was our first money goal. And then talking to him about financial independence. So that just blew the lid off and really had to, reevaluate life completely when that conversation came on. So we want to share with you talking about money with your spouses, what that looks like, how to get them involved if they're not involved, how to get them interested in financial independence, retire early if they're not interested. So Danielle, tell me a little bit about your husband. What was his financial situation when you guys met? Did you talk about money? Was it taboo for you? And when did you talk to him about financial independence, retire early, the FIRE concept?
So my husband, when I met him, was in between jobs, living in Rwanda, East Africa. He's from there, had never really been outside of East Africa ever, never been on an airplane. We were both, yes, he had trained as a lawyer, but was unable to finish his degree. He didn't have enough money to complete it. There was some drama, and so he was working for like a cell phone company, left that, and was in between jobs. Went to this human rights learning program that I was in as a foreign participant, and that's how we met. And we didn't talk too much about money just because there was such a difference, right? Like there, you make like $100, $200 a month. And so, my income was vastly different than that. So I talked a little bit about it, but, nothing like, it wasn't like a huge topic of conversation. We ended up being together long distance for a while and decided to have him come to the United States. So I actually had to sponsor him. So money was involved with that. I had to pay, to bring him here. I had to make a certain amount of money, which I was making like $44,000 a year, which wasn't a lot, but it was enough to sponsor a person to come here.
Wow.
So I had already kind of learned about the FIRE movement. And then like a little bit later, I was maybe a year after getting married, I was much more interested and involved in maxing out my accounts at that point. And I would tell him, and he was semi-interested, but not like completely. And I just kept inviting him and kept showing him the numbers. And I would get really excited, like, hey, like, in 10 years, we could like be totally financially independent. And like, this is what that means. So I just kept the enthusiasm. And I also shared a lot about my frugality. Like the first time he came here, like he came with like one pair of pants and like 3 shirts. So like the first thing we did was went to Goodwill. And honestly, I hadn't been to Goodwill in a long time since I saw him. I hadn't I hadn't been to Goodwill for many years. And so when he
Mm.
came, that was like the first time I'd been for a long time, and it like reignited the spark of like, there's awesome clothes
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I ended up like buying my wedding dress there, which was
Oh,
like
wow.
not really a wedding dress. And
Hmm.
but anyway, we got him like a full wardrobe for like $100 or something like that.
Wow. What did he think
So
about that?
for
Like a
him
full, yeah.
in East Africa, secondhand clothes are actually preferred. They're usually like the nicer clothes. Like clothes that are
Wow.
able to be secondhand are not cheap knockoff items.
That's
So
awesome.
he didn't have any like stigma around it.
Cool.
And
Okay.
it was all very new. He had never been out of East Africa, right?
Hmm.
So he's here in this totally new environment. There's this like crazy lady that he's marrying who, is like super frugal. But I had, nice things. I had this pretty much very new condo. It was only like 7-year-old condo that I just bought. I had a pretty new car, like a 2-year-old car. So like things looked really like nice and
Hmm.
fancy, especially coming from where he was coming from. Everything looks really different here. So,
Hmm. And
but
you're in the Bay Area.
I'm in the Bay Area,
Yeah,
which I
that
don't
that
think
kind
he
of.
understood. He didn't understand what that meant for a little bit until he realized, and he went to like Texas and other places and realized the difference between the
Yeah.
Bay Area and like other parts of the United States.
Hmm.
So, so I was very frugal, and I think eventually that kind of like became just our culture. I don't know naturally before that if he would have been frugal or not. I think that's a
Mm.
question. I don't know if he knows either. It's kind of like, and you never know what life would have been like if it was different, right?
Yeah.
So, so we were frugal, but we also traveled a lot, and we talked about money, but only really like honestly, like last night was probably one of the first times where I realized like he's kind of interested in finances. Like he was telling me that he was telling his other friends, like, he's connected with a lot of people who immigrated from Rwanda that live here in Texas and
Nice.
all over. And he encouraged them to get a Roth IRA. Like
What?
I didn't
Oh
even
my
know he really kind
gosh.
of like really knew what that was, even
Right.
though he's
Yeah.
had one. I've been funding his Roth IRA, or I started funding it like the second he got here,
Wow,
and
that's so
then
cool.
he took it over. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, so like he's really into it now, and he's on the same page as far as spending. Like probably he spends a little bit more than me,
Hmm.
but not dramatically. Like we have a little bit of a difference in like value of the dollar and what to do with
Mm.
it, but not dramatic.
Mm. Hmm. Wow, that's so cool. Now, does he get stressed out when you talk about money these days?
No, I think that he's excited when he looks at our progress. Like if our
Hmm.
net worth jumps up for any reason, like the stock market goes up, I'll kind of show him like, look at this, just get him excited. I'll also show him the downturns, and he's like, ooh,
Yeah.
and he's learned not to say, should we pull out? Like
Right. Okay.
I've sat him down and been like, that's exactly what we're not supposed to do at this
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Uh, so I don't think it's stressful. It gets stressful if, like, for example, we both upgraded our phones
Mm.
recently.
Hmm.
And for me, that kind of causes anxiety because I start to feel like, oh, well, if we open this floodgate, like then we should just
Okay.
upgrade everything. So it was more me. And then, he really wants something, and it's just a little like negotiation. Like, well, does it have to be like the iPhone 14, or can it be like
Hmm.
the iPhone 11? You know what I
Okay.
mean? And
Yeah.
he's fine with the iPhone 11, and it was a fraction of the price.
Right. Wow.
What about you? Is money a contentious
We've
topic or?
we've come a long way. So me and my husband, we've been together for like almost 15 years. He's from Peru. So he moved here when he was like 19 years old. A lot of his family was here, and so they kind of sponsored him to come here. He had to learn English. It was like still very second language for him. Now people don't even realize that he speaks Spanish. His English is so well. Um, but so when he moved here, he, was working little odds and end jobs that he could do where he couldn't really, didn't have to speak that much. So he was like car washing and worked in a grocery, like stocking and stuff. So he was earning income, and then he went to college, but then he kind of like dropped out because he was like couldn't afford it. So his family didn't have any money to help support him. So he had to work, and when he was living in Peru, he was living very poor. You know, it was just him and his mom in one bedroom for his entire life, living at other people's houses. His mom was disabled by the time she was 30. So he was actually helping a lot with that. So he kind of grew up in a very like frugal environment because there just wasn't anything to go around. Some of his family members from the US would send him stuff, and that would be his only new thing. So he really knew how to value and take care of things so that it would last longer. And I think a lot of that kind of stuck with him coming to the US. Now, when I met him, he was a bartender. We met partying. So I think some things kind of changed a little bit. He did have some consumer debt when we finally started talking about money, but he still was like living a little bit within his means. It wasn't like too far out of reach. When we met, we didn't really talk about money, but then when we started like dating and really kind of were getting a little more serious and saying that we wanted to get married, we started talking more about money, and I kind of opened up to tell him how much I was earning, to kind of just be a little bit more transparent. And I remember asking him later on and years later, and I told him about that conversation. He's like, I don't remember you telling me that. So I'm like, okay, I guess that didn't mean anything, you know. So we wanted to get married and we wanted to travel. So that was like our first together money goal. And I told him, I was like, look, it's going to cost us, you know, each like $10,000 to travel for a year in Europe. I did a little bit of research and was Nomadic Matt. He's got a website. He talks about living in Europe on $50 a day. So we did that as a couple, pretty much like 50, 45, $40 a month or $40 a day, traveling Europe and Asia. But I told him, I was like, we need to save 10 grand within 2 years so that we can go and do this. And he was like completely on board. He's like, okay, what do we have to do? And it was like, okay, we're not going to eat out as much. You know, we're not going to buy, you know, we're not going to be buying new clothes and new things for the house or anything like that, because we want to ditch it all and go and travel. We didn't want to keep like a storage unit or anything. We ended up with just a couple boxes at the end, that we kept at our family's house. So that helped, not buying and purchasing new things. So we kind of started like with this, together. We started changing our habits as a couple, and we've done that a lot throughout our lives. So I think that has really set us up. But even when I sat down and said like, hey, you know, we're making great progress, but maybe we could do better, and he would just like, it would be so stressful. And I remember telling him like, okay, if we want to talk about money, do I need to let you know a week in advance, so that this it doesn't become like, you know, an argument or something? So eventually that kind of like smoothed over a little bit. And then 6 months before we were going to quit our jobs and travel, I found Financial Independence Retire Early. And I told him about that. And he was just like, what? Okay, wait a minute. Should we be quitting and traveling? Maybe we should pivot to do that. Maybe we should be focusing and change our money goal to be, you know, try to retire early. And I was really shocked because I mean, it's hard to get your partner on board, and he was kind of like 100% on board. You know, he's like, retire early, that's great. He like does not like to be tied down to somebody else's schedule. So you tell him, you know, I need you to come in working, you know, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, like that gives him some stress and anxiety. Cause, you know, there's a lot of life things that happen and you want to pivot with it, and you can't when you're stuck into an employer schedule. So that's probably a little different than what a lot of people are used to, that, you know, my husband kind of jumped on board with financial independence fairly early within our journey, but it's because we had those spending habits 2 years prior, that we've changed for traveling. But I would say even after that time frame, there was still like stress that came out of, and there was still a lot of education and learning about investing and that risk in the stock market, like you said, with your partner. But the thing that I did the same with you was like, hey, okay, let's use this net worth tracker. Let's track our journey. Let's track, you know, our wins, and then look at when the market is going down. Let's try to educate ourselves together. So I would send him articles and information, even though sometimes it just falls on deaf ears. But like every now and then in passing, I'll just like, you know, hey, there's I-Series bonds and they're, 9.6%, or our bank just came out with like a 5% CD and we can earn 5%. Like if we put this much money in, that means we're making, this much money a month, like, and we don't have to work for it. Just feeding him that information a little bit at a time. Easily digestible has helped bring him along on the journey. And like nowadays, I'm the one who's the spender. So more frugal than I am, with a lot of things. So, I think he has fallen back on those traits of like when he grew up younger and just didn't have a lot to go around. He values like keeping his money. He knows the importance. Like we do want to retire early. We came up, what does that look like? What does retiring early look like? So we sat down and said, what do we want to do with our lives during that time? And I think what helped was when we went on that trip, we could feel like, yes, we don't have to, nobody's calling at our door to like show up to work. We had the freedom to do the things that we really wanted to do. We've sat down and created that dream of what we want to do when we retire. If you're looking to get your partner on board with financial independence, with money goals or anything, you should be asking them, one, what will motivate them to save money? And beyond like wanting to buy a boat or like take a trip to Greece or something. Those are great also, but ask your partner what's their ideal day if they didn't have to work. Boil that down to what really brings them happiness, because I think that will bring them on board faster to wanting to save money.
Instead of like coming at our partners trying to correct them or nag them or kind of get and then try to control them, it's useful to see ourselves as like salespeople, right? Everybody's selling something all the time. Once we kind of just make peace with that, like it's just true, right? And so instead of kind of going with the negative side of like, hey, you need to cut your spending, like this is what we're going to be doing, don't you want this, blah blah blah, we got to come in with like wow, wouldn't it be awesome if you could literally do whatever you want pretty much all day, every day? Like you want to go and just spend a year in Costa Rica, like let's just do it, right? Because you're financially free. Whereas you could have spent that money on a brand new car and maybe a bigger house, and now you can't go to Costa Rica for a year. So it's really aligning with the values, like being clear on like where are your values. Now your spouse partner may say, I want the new car. I don't want to have the freedom to go to Costa Rica. And I think that's difficult because that may be how they truly feel. And that's really a conversation of, okay, well, you may have different values. So how can you both get your needs met? Maybe they get a semi-used car that's still nice, new to them, but not necessarily so expensive. So maybe it sets you back from your fire goal like a year. And that's a compromise you make so that both of you are getting your needs met. So sometimes it's a compromise, right? And sometimes you can be a great salesperson and bring them on board and get them really motivated, which I think for the most part has been my story, right? Is that I really sold this pretty well. I got really excited. I love money. Like I love it so much. I'm doing this, right? So obviously it's been a big hobby of mine to just kind of figure this stuff out. And I think that some of that was infectious, right? And he caught some of it. I didn't realize how much he caught. He caught quite a bit of it. And he's excited about it too. Even though he plans on working for, I don't know, for 30 years. He's still excited about the fact he could just like quit for 2 years and we could just like travel the world. So that motivates him more than a car. But that isn't going to be everyone. And money really, it's like that root chakra, scrunchy mamas, okay? It's been the survival plexus of our life, right? So it's like it can be triggering for people. Let's just be honest, it's triggering for me. Like spending money is hard for me. It's super hard to like go on vacation and know that money is leaving because I have, and there's going to be a post on this coming up pretty soon, bag lady syndrome, which is basically where I have a deep-seated fear that I will end up in poverty. And that could be from the way I was raised, the fact that my parents went through bankruptcy and were houseless for a while. But it's there, right? And so threats to my money, even like little ones, like getting charged a fee when I wasn't expecting it,
Mm.
can set me off, can make me feel really upset.
Wow.
So I think we need to learn about our partners. Like, are they dealing with that too? When we bring up
Hmm.
topics about money, are we kind of getting into their root chakra, their
Yeah.
survival and threatening it, you know?
Hmm.
There's also this piece which happens with people that immigrate to this country, it happens with people from this country,
Hmm.
where you feel like you deserve nice things. You work hard, you should have
Yeah.
those nice things. And it's hard to kind of confront that directly. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You'd probably get some defensiveness if you just confront that. It's deep in our culture, it's deep in capitalist materialistic culture. And the only way to really kind of deal with that is to start breaking it apart a little bit and seeing if that can be
Hmm.
transferred somewhere else. Like, for example, I definitely feel that way sometimes. Like, oh, like these people have such a nice house. Like, I want to sit there on a porch drinking, whatever on that porch. Why don't I have a porch with a yard, you know? But then I
Uh-huh.
start to think, like, first of all, one day I could have that for sure. But that I value my freedom more
Mm.
than that. Would I want that house? Like that, you don't just get that house. You
Hmm.
don't just get the car. You get the house and the car with with a subtraction of your freedom and your life
Hmm.
energy to pay for those things.
Yeah.
And when I look at it like that, I don't feel like I'm missing out because I would much rather have time freedom
Hmm.
and flexibility in my life than to have this really nice thing that basically chains me to it and forces me to work when I don't want to.
Yeah.
I'd rather live in a small house with my children and be able to do whatever I want, take them on vacations, homeschool them, wake up late and just hang out, than have a huge house where I have to bring them to daycare because I have to work this super strict 9 to 5 job plus a side hustle to pay for those really nice things.
Hmm.
So it's really a choice. And we really need to work with our partners, work with ourselves to kind of figure out like what do we really want?
Hmm. I think one thing that would really help for trying to bring your partners on board is like financial date night. So do set up, like I mentioned before, like, oh, do I need to tell you a week before so that we can talk about money? Do that. Set up time, schedule it out so that you're not thinking about it all the time and that you are both mentally prepared and emotionally prepared, like we're talking about that root chakra. I think going to a financial coach or a financial planner can help. We interviewed a friend of mine, Julie, and she talked about going to that planner and how it really helped. There can be kind of like a counselor for you to kind of hash out some, emotional triggers and ties to money, come up with a money goal together, what you are aligned on. Um, of course, financial planners these days don't really understand the concept of FIRE, financial independence, retire early. So you're going to have to school them a little bit if you want that to be a goal. But I mean, we all want to retire eventually or just have financial security. They understand that concept. Um, both of you get a net worth tracking app, expense tracker, budget tracker. Both of you have it on your phone. Plug in the accounts and whether they go into it or not, at least they have it. And if you talk about it, maybe eventually at some point they'll log in and say, oh, wow, but set it up for them on their phone. So that could be a really helpful tool. Me as a family, we don't do cash envelopes, but I know that could be helpful for some people. If one of your partners do spend more, either using like a credit card where there's a limit, a debit card where there's a limit, or those cash envelopes, like, you've got $100 for the month. I mean, you don't want to be the one who's kind of dictating that. You don't want to have that emotional pressure on your relationship, telling your partner that they can't spend a certain amount of money. But you can say, hey, I'm doing this for myself, and then maybe get them on board that way. Um, or say I've only set aside $50 for the kids this month, do it for your kids and show like how that's going to help your budget that month, and maybe your partner will get on board.
Key there is to just keep them involved and to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, and address their concerns if they bring them up, if they feel
Yeah.
like they're being controlled or that the budget's too tight. Like, we sat down, and this is really the first year we did this, where we really sat down and like made a real budget together. And I
Wow.
asked for input and feedback and asked him what he wanted. And we
Mm-hmm.
both kind of figured out, like, well, how much fun money should there be? And what
Mm-hmm.
type of things do we like to do for fun? And what should we cut out? And are you okay with cutting that out? And what would that be like for you if you don't go to the restaurant all the time? What would it be like? How many times do you want to go to the coffee shop? Like
Mhm.
allowing things. And it gives kind of like
Yeah.
permission to do the things that we like
Yeah.
and also cuts away the things that we don't like. And then we have this clear budget that includes everything we want. And it
Hmm.
still helps us achieve our financial goals. So it's like everyone gets their needs met. And being honest, I think, is extremely important. Like, for example, I really don't want expensive gifts.
Yeah.
And my partner knows that, right? Like,
Hmm.
he knows that when it's my birthday, like, please don't get me some random thing that costs $300. Like, I would much
Yeah.
rather invest that. Like, your wife
Right.
like wants VTSAX. Like, that's what I want for Christmas, and that's what I
Oh
want
my
for my
gosh.
birthday. So please don't get me anything else. I mean, that's just who I am,
Yeah.
right? Not
Yeah.
everyone's gonna be a big nerd like that. Some people do want cool stuff, which that's great.
Mhm.
But honestly, right now, like, I can't think of many things that like physical material things that I want.
Yeah, that's a great thing to cut out of a budget. Like honestly, if you are, you two spouses, you have everything you need in your house. Like me and my husband, we don't really exchange gifts for any for like birthdays or Christmas. Like if we need something, we'll go and get it. That's not our love language. What
Yeah.
those the I think I have the book, the
Quality time. I
five
want
love
quality time.
languages.
Oh wow, look at
My
you.
husband got it, so that's cool. I'm leaving it
Wow.
here next to the bedside because my place is going to be Airbnb next month, so maybe the next couple will read
Oh,
it.
yeah,
But
wow.
me and my husband both like, yeah, quality time. And so that really ties into that retiring early, because quality time is a love language that we share. So we want to be able to spend that time together. To be honest, I didn't sit down with a budget. I've hardly ever sat down with a budget. We just have that expense tracking to just kind of like guardrails of what we spend our money on. But the reason why is because me and my husband jumped on board together. Um, we both jumped on board for financial independence, retire early. So every time we make a purchase, like that's in our mind. It has helped us stop frivolously spending, mindless spending, because we know when we trade that dollar, we're trading that time. You go to work, 9 to 5, you make whatever, $100 for the day, and you go and, spend half of that on eating out. So you just, worked half the day just so you can go and eat. And when you have that, shared goal, that could be helpful. Budget tool can be helpful. Sitting down as a couple, talking through it. Um, Money is a real stress in a relationship, and it can tear a lot of families apart. So you just want to be delicate with how you have that conversation. Reach out to people that you need advice from, and just be gentle with that conversation.
There is
Seven.
no right and wrong. It's not black and white. And I
Yeah.
think there are benefits to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Someone being a little bit looser with spending can help someone who's a little too tight with spending, which is kind of like our dynamic. It's similar. I see it as like having a healthy diet, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about behavior. This is all
Yeah.
about changing your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Having a healthy diet, fresh fruits and vegetables, we all know that's important, but not
Mm-hmm.
all of us do it, right? Because there's a lot of ease just going and getting the prepared thing, or it's a lot of work, or it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
taste as good. And then if you get too focused on eating healthy and you do not allow yourself to have any other types of food, I mean, that gets very, very restrictive. And that would be the
Mm-hmm.
same with a budget, right? If you get
Yeah.
so restrictive that you can't have things that bring you joy or that are exciting for you, like you can't go out with your friends because you don't want to spend $10 on a drink or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that really defeats the purpose. The purpose
Yeah.
is here is to have a good life, you know? So we're
Yes.
trying to strike a balance. Like, you can budget going out and have an expensive overpriced drink with your friends every
Mm-hmm.
month. You know, you just
Yeah.
don't want to do that every day. And you
Yeah.
want to make sure the numbers align. But you can't, by default, you don't just cut everything.
Mm-hmm.
You need some extraneous spending. You need some weird, you know, frivolous
Yeah.
stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
because that's life and you need a flexibility. And this is all about creating flexibility. So
Mm-hmm.
this can become something that comes in between you and your partner. And I think that what we're trying to say is you kind of take it from in between you, you put it in front of both of you, and you
Mm-hmm.
both try to figure out how to get all of your needs met by kind of
Yeah.
modifying this thing. And if that means that you spend an extra $500 a year because your partner just loves really expensive organic coffee,
Yeah.
is that really gonna demolish your fire number? Probably
Right.
not. Because honestly, if you can control your housing expense, if you control your transportation expenses, if you can control your food expenses, the recurring expenses, an extra coffee,
Mm-hmm.
even to the tune of $500 a year, is really not going to make or break much. And if
Yeah.
that keeps your partner happy and keeps your marriage better and happier, $500 is worth it. It's definitely less expensive than a marriage counselor. So,
Yeah. We're talking about financial independence, retire early, and having that as a money goal because that's our ultimate goal. But every one of these concepts and steps also helps you get out of debt too. So this is the same, like take it away from one of you two, put it out in front, like Danielle is saying, use these same concepts of that budgeting, create it so that it aligns with your values and the lifestyle that you want to live, build these habits, build these beliefs about money, and that will help you as well get out of debt. And then once you get out of debt, keep all that foundation in place and change that goal from debt, swap it out to financial independence, financial security, and keep marching towards it together as a couple. If you have enjoyed the show, please share with another scrunchy mama and hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. For show notes, resources, and links to our other video shorts, check out our website, scrunchify.com.